you have an inquiry into McGuinty, what happens is every officer who takes the stand realizes the inquiry is not into him. And then when he gets off the stand, the politicians are going to burn his ass if he says something bad, right? Now you make the inquiry into individual officers. Now they have to take the stand, and human nature will kick in. Each officer will protect himself, right? Because they know that the inquiry is about them. And they're going to tell the truth. They're going to say, well, I only did this because I was following orders. Well, who gave the orders? And then they're going to rat everyone out because you focused on them, right? And human nature will kick in. But if you focus on the politician, then the officer says, well, I'm free to say whatever I want. And then he knows that his job is to cover the politician's butt. Oh, no, it was police discretion. And you notice here,
speaking of police, there's our buddies.
You notice that Toby wants to do about land claims, or land ownership. I talk about the Ontario land title deed. Let's see whether or not the OPP and the government stands behind the Ontario land title deed, because that's what really people want to know. If they talk about land ownership, then you got 200 years of debating.
That's
right. Now we already have a land title deed system in place. The question is, the police don't enforce it. And so the inquiry shouldn't ask who owns the land. The inquiry should ask, okay, we already have a system in place. Why is the OPP and the government not enforcing it? That's the only question that should be asked.
Absolutely.
We already have laws. We don't need any new laws. The question is, why do the police and the government not enforce the existing laws? Whether it's a land title deed, whether it's a Police Service Act, whether it's a criminal code. That's the only question that needs to be asked. All you gotta do is watch the video of Officer Michaud in Kew there, where I ask him about land title deeds. And it's a joke. That's who you got to get him on the stand, because he says in the video, well, I will enforce it as soon as I'm told to. You got to get him on the stand and say, who's going to tell you? Who is it that you're taking orders from? Right? Because he says he's not prepared to enforce land title deeds.
But he also says he doesn't recognize any, you cannot tell him that I own this house.
Exactly.
And
even if you presented your deed, he'd say that doesn't mean anything.
So,
That's the problem. The problem isn't that we don't have recognized laws and a system. The problem is the OPP doesn't accept it. And you think of DC, see, a roundabout way, this answers DC. Because if the OPP had to enforce the law, the occupation on DC would have lasted 1 hour. Then they would have been arrested for trespassing. Because the enforcement of the land title deed would have stopped the occupation. Now they can do a protest at the front gate, just like anybody in democratic society can. They can stand there with billboards, they can hand out leaflets, just like anybody can. But the moment they walked on to DC and did an occupation, trespassing laws would have kicked in, they would have been removed. And that's why the entire thing has to look into the OPP. Because once you solve that problem, there are no occupations.
I did some reading before I came down here, and it's almost kind of like that Miller commercial, less filling tastes great, like Toby wants to have sounds like a thoroughgoing inquiry into this mess. You guys want to keep the focus relatively narrow, and I'm just wondering why you think that Toby's approach is flawed. Why do you not want to go the way that Toby wants to go?
Determining anything, including who owns the land and things of that nature, is going to be of no value if there's no law enforcement. And I'll tell you why I think that. The federal government has said, with respect to DC, the claim is not valid.
Right.
Now, in spite of that, there is a handful, a couple of trailers on there, and a few motley-looking characters who squat on there. We will get arrested if we set foot on it. So, determining the ownership of a piece of property means nothing if there's no law enforcement.
Right.
So, my position is, let's get the law enforcement matter ironed out first. because there's a petition circulating that has several thousand signatures on it that calls for an inquiry into the practices of Julian Fantino and the OPP.
Right.
So that is what the constituents want.
Yes.
Why not get that over and done with first? And then, if you want to have an inquiry into land ownership or whatever, fine. But if there's no law enforcement, it means nothing. Who
Right.
owns the land?
Right. Okay. And you're Doug Fleming?
Yes.
Okay, that's great, Doug. Now, who was the other person that you introduced me to there?
Merlin Kenwright, which is here.
Okay. Merlin, this is an ongoing situation. We're now in what, the third year of this disruption in Caledonia?
Heading for the 4th.
Heading for the fourth. Well, what has it done to the town at this point in time? We know that it's been a real drag on the community, a real drag on its economy, and it's really upset a lot of people. Where is Caledonia's mind at right now with regard to this protest? Is the community thoroughly depressed by what's going on, or has it managed to adapt? Are they getting on with their lives, or is this still like a real big thorn in the side of everybody?
Well, I think the problem that the community has is, excuse me, the Chamber of Commerce continues to say that businesses are doing all right. If you look at the main street of Caledonia, you can tell without too much doubt that businesses aren't doing all right. And if in fact you talk to the business owners and ask them how things are, they'll tell you straight up it's terrible. But when you once again go to the Chamber of Commerce and ask them, say, well, the businesses say they're not doing well, the spokesperson continues to say that things are all right. And they will be all right if we just have patience. While we're nearing the end of the third year, the community's been more than patient. And the problem, as Doug has alluded to, is the lack of law enforcement. We do have a land titles system.
Yep.
Why would we ask Toby Barrett to investigate a system that's already in place? Why not enforce the laws, and that system will kick in and answer any questions that anybody might have about who owns the land, or whatever questions they have pertaining to the land.
It's almost, Merlin, like to open up the inquiry to the broad focus that Toby has in mind is almost asking for someone to step forward and try to throw into question that system of land titles that you're talking about. I mean, that's already a done deal. That's people got title to the land.
It is a done deal.
And it's potentially risky to have an inquiry almost suggesting that this is open to interpretation or open to question.
That's the crux of the matter, exactly. And when you look at the petition that is circulating now, in my opinion, and the opinion of others, is that all this is going to do is derail the petition that wants answers to the question as to why we have race-based policing, no law enforcement if you're Native, law enforcement if you're non-Native.
Protection is number one.
So if that petition gets derailed by an inquiry into land titles and who owns and what, like, why would anybody want to derail the very thing that we've focused on for 3 years? This group has focused on law enforcement for 3 years. We've never even discussed land titles or whether the natives are right or whether they're wrong. That doesn't enter into it. Enforce the law, and everything else is elementary.
I think there's a couple other key points that you might want to know. Okay. Everybody here are lifelong conservatives. Okay? I know Merlin helped work on Toby Barrett's last election. I know Peter's worked on conservative elections in the past. I've worked on them. Jeff's worked on them. We're not a group of liberals here trying to derail Toby's idea. We are the conservative grassroots in this riding, right? In this province. And all we're asking for, if the Conservative Party want to bring forward an inquiry, then let's not make it about politics. They want to focus on McGuinty. We want to focus on the OPP.
Right.
And there's a big difference because you'll never, never, never prove political interference. Okay? We all know it might be there, but you'll never prove it. So let's deal with the OPP and the fact that the OPP systematically violate people's charter rights. Because that's really what's going on in Caledonia. When there's an occupation going on someone's property, you lose all your rights as soon as that happens.
Yeah.
And that is what's illegal. The OPP illegally violates the charter rights, and that's unacceptable.
Well, don't they also, hasn't every police officer out there wearing the uniform sworn an oath
Absolutely.
to uphold the law?
To uphold the law, to prevent offenses, and to uphold the charter rights. But you hear Fantino and the OPP saying they're peacekeepers. But their job is to prevent offenses. It means an officer cannot stand there and watch crimes being committed. And yet they do all the time.
How many times have I told Fantino, I was a peacekeeper. You're not. I put the blue beret on. I put the blue helmet on. That's a peacekeeper. And I've asked him, are we in a failed state? Because that's when peacekeepers kick in. Are we in a failed state? He won't answer that question. As a matter of fact, he won't speak to me at all, but he will speak to the native thugs and criminals.
See, the OPP's definition of peacekeeper is that as long as someone isn't killed, they've done their job. If you end up in the hospital or with brain damage, that's still keeping the peace because nobody died.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the standards we have in this province.
Yes.
Right? And that's the issue that has to really be dealt with. Do the OPP obey the Police Service Act? Do they obey the Criminal Code? And do they obey the Charter of Rights? That's the only question that needs to be asked. Because once you answer those questions, then the lawlessness ends.
Yeah.
And believe me, an inquiry needs a clear question to answer. They don't need a broad. It's like asking the inquiry to say, tell us, what's the problem with the government? Well, it's so open-ended.
Yeah.
You could go on for 20 years. You can't have a broad question when you're dealing with an inquiry. It has to be clear-cut and very concise.
Now, what's going to happen if this whole bunch is going to walk in on the Douglas Estates right at this moment? See what's going to happen.
If we walked,
Yes.
we would get arrested.
Well, yeah.